everybody. Welcome to the I Didn't Like the Ending podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Van Brocklin. And today we have a guest. This is Gilbert.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Gilbert, what is something unique about yourself that you could tell all of our followers?
Something unique. Really, the main thing that I can really think of is just like I enjoy ballroom rhythm dancing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I competed last year. Just me and my partner. It was really fun. So it was in the styles of like cha-cha, bolero, and mambo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
How long have you been ballroom dancing?
Geez, I actually need to like count one of these days.
I feel like it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. I started when I was around 13.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been about, almost 12 years now.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've
not
seen some
not any
shows.
good, but
I feel like you're great. You're so good. Yeah, I've seen some of your shows. You're fantastic up there.
yeah.
You are also a gamer, right?
Yes.
What games do you like to play?
Well, growing up, it's just been mainly Nintendo games. I really enjoy like the Kirby series and Pokemon.
Yeah.
Now, I've gotten out of Destiny 2, and me and my friends, we play Helldivers 2.
Uh-huh.
Really, really fun game. Just kind of like an ongoing war sort of thing.
Would you consider yourself a nerd?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, same. And recently you had a little get together with your friends.
Yes. Recently, me and my friends, we did a Lord of the Rings marathon. We did all the extended cuts, and we ate like hobbits.
So when you say eat like hobbits, what does that mean?
We had breakfast. We had second breakfast, 11 Z's, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper, and then also a dessert. So if you want, I can go into like the nitty gritty of that menu.
Yeah, like how were you so insanely full, or were you like, this is this is how I should be eating every day? Like, this is absolutely my diet.
I don't know if
the
everyone
Hobbit's diet should be my diet.
That's a lot of meals. If you eat light enough, perfect. That's fine.
Uh-huh.
And if you plan light meals, then yes, that I was good for the full day. I started having some troubles when I went back for seconds for dinner because I made like meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and Brussels sprouts.
It's a little heavier. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a little heavier, so it's just like, okay, I probably shouldn't have gone seconds, but I was still fine throughout the whole thing.
So how much of the meals did you plan and prepare for?
I did second breakfast. Anyone who also cooks, just if you're making tiny corn muffins, put a little liner in between the baking sheet and the actual corn muffin. Then you're fine. Then it won't break.
Oh no, did you have a bunch of them stick to the pan?
Yeah.
Oh, that's annoying.
Yeah. So I made them when I got home at around 11 without any liner. I thought I was doing good because it's just like, okay, I sprayed it down. We'll be fine. I got like two of the first batch. The rest started crumbling.
Two out of like what, 24 on a whole muffin tin or something?
Yeah, 2 out of 24 out of a whole muffin tin. It's just like, damn it. I was so pissed. I was so pissed off. I chucked the rest because like everyone that I started, except for those two, just broke.
But then you made more the next day?
My mom actually did make some more the next day, and she saw what happened in the kitchen, and she's just like, oh no. So
Mom to the rescue.
Mom to the rescue.
Oh, that's cute. I'm super stoked to have you on my podcast today, and I love your background. I am curious, how often do you listen to true crime or dive into those kinds of stories? What's your background with true crime?
Honestly, next to none. Like I hear things every now and then, but probably the most that I have with true crime is one of my ex-girlfriends really liked what is the show? It's like a true crime show. It was popular. I honestly do not remember the name.
CSI, Bones, Dexter.
No. Murder something. See,
the Murder Show.
That just shows you how much I don't listen or don't know anything about like true.
Something.
I don't know.
Okay, if you could put it into like nerd terms, your level of true crime knowledge.
I'm a noob, 100%, or even worse, I haven't picked up the controller. Some of my friends have like suggested a couple things like the Scotland Yard personals.
Mm,
That's one that my friend has talked
interesting.
about.
Okay, yeah.
And if I'm not wrong, it's like old, more old, like when Scotland Yard was like a huge, huge part of like the crime world. Not crime world, but like crime solving world.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting.
So,
I'll have to check that one out. I actually haven't seen it, watched it.
nor have I. So, he recommended it to me. That's pretty much it.
I love that. Okay, cool. So we've got noob level. The case that I have for you today is really intense. Before we get into our case, I do have some announcements. I forgot to do these. Thank you so much to all of our followers, and thank you so much for the feedback that we've received so far. This is a passion project of mine, and it's extremely heartwarming to see other people coming out and supporting the podcast because I really enjoy creating the content for you all. And I'm now posting every other Monday on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and a couple of other ones. I have the links below. Another update is that my dad is my biggest supporter. He's my number one fan, and he listens to every episode. I have all of 4 out. This will be my 5th one. And my dad, he says that the crime doesn't bother him as much as me dropping the F-bomb.
Mm.
So from this moment forward, I will no longer be dropping the F-bomb to spare my dad's ears because I want my biggest supporter to be happy. So love you, Dad. Thank you so much for your support. We are going to be getting into our case. And today's sources for this episode are Wikipedia, Murderpedia,
All the PDS.
Listverse, The Guardian, Liverpool Echo, and Change.org. Trigger warning, this episode features discussions of violence, political violence, and sexual abuse of a minor, so please listen with care. One of the more complex issues society deals with today is the issue of vigilantism. Vigilantism is a person who operates outside the law in an attempt to suppress crime. They often seek to punish alleged wrongdoers and may see themselves as filling a void where the processes of law are viewed as lacking, inadequate, or corrupt. Some of the most popular characters in fiction are individuals who take the law into their own hands. Well-loved examples in media are childhood favorites like Robin Hood stealing from the rich to give to the poor, Batman protecting an otherwise corrupt Gotham from criminals. More recent popular adult media like the series Dexter, following the story of a serial killer who kills serial killers. It's easy to identify with a heroic vigilante who decides to fight crime on their own and seek justice on those who have done wrong.
Would you consider like Sean Spencer from Psych also a vigilante? Yeah, he does. He works with the Santa Barbara Police Department. For those of you who don't know, Sean Spencer is a character from Psych. He's a fake psychic detective. Spoiler, it's in the first episode. But he opens up his own firm and just goes on solving crime. So that's I'm curious about that. Would you consider that vigilantism as well?
I would say like to a degree, like a vigilante with a small v, not like a big.
Gotcha.
But like small.
All undercase. Maybe a big E at the end, but just everything else lowercase.
Yeah, I would say so. America was essentially founded on this idea of vigilantism through history like the American Revolution, in which we honor the vigilante heroes like George Washington. The terrifying reality and what's problematic with vigilantism is that while some historic vigilantes are honored as sympathetic figures, others go too far in their desire to be judge, jury, and executioner, where in the name of justice, men have felt free to murder without consequence. In some cases, completely innocent people wind up losing their lives, like the horrific practice of lynching, the most common form of vigilantism in the United States, with several thousand episodes during the 19th and 20th centuries. The majority of victims being black men in the South. Whatever the circumstances, whenever vigilantism takes place, it's sure to be surrounded by controversy. Today's case is a wildly unfortunate example of that exact controversy, where after learning about this particular case, one finds themselves conflicted, possibly even rooting for the man infamously known as the UK's most dangerous serial killer. Not to be confused with the most violent prisoner in the UK, who is Charles Bronson. The man in our case today has a few other nicknames, such as Hannibal the Cannibal, Spoons, and Brain Eater.
Ooh.
His name, Robert Maudsley.
Not Hannibal Lecter?
Not Hannibal Lecter.
Oh.
This man is apparently so dangerous that he has been kept in a glass box underground. One has to walk through 17 locked doors to even get to him.
Huh.
What has this man done to make him so dangerous that he's literally kept underground in a glass box? And he has been held in this glass box for 40 long years.
This was years ago, right? Is this man still alive?
The man is currently still alive.
Still in a glass box?
Still in a glass box.
Cool.
Are you getting stressed a little bit right now?
It just, I need to change a shirt. I don't know. When I think of like true crimes or anything that has to do with like, again, English or Great Britain crimes, I always think of like way back when, like Jack the Ripper times. Like, I don't know. Most crimes that I hear today is just like, another gang violence or other political things. So, yeah. So this is going to be interesting. Man, for 40 years has been kept in a glass box. One of his aliases was Spoons.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Is he really so dangerous that he needs to be kept in a glass box underground and behind so many locked doors? That's, of course, what we're going to talk about today. There are also a lot of myths surrounding this case and some of the crimes that Robert committed that have become the stuff of legend. And over time, the stories have definitely become more extreme and sensationalized. This episode will get to the truth of what actually happened. So let's jump in and talk about the most dangerous prisoner in the UK, Robert Maudsley. Robert Maudsley was born on the 26th of June, 1953, to Mom Jean and Dad George. He was born just outside the city of Liverpool, England. He was born the fourth child of 12. His other siblings are Paul, Kevin, and Brenda when he's only 6 months old. This is important because at that time, neighbors saw the children were being abused and neglected and reported the parents to local authorities. The house was dirty and cramped. The children were going without food, no clean clothes to wear, and when authorities saw this, they took baby Robert and his siblings to live in a Catholic orphanage in Liverpool. Robert and his siblings grew up there in the safety of the nuns' care. This was the first time in his life that he had stability. He had regular meals, and the nuns and other children at the orphanage was considered his family. They all looked out for each other, and Robert was an exceptionally bright child, and he thrived with his siblings in this environment. Their parents would rarely visit, and Robert never really cared. He didn't know them as his parents since he was so young when he was brought to the orphanage. In fact, his parents visited so rarely that all the kids thought they were orphans. Time passes, and when Robert turns 9, his older brother Paul was about to be adopted. The orphanage needed to contact the parents to get permission for the adoption, and for whatever reason, the parents decided that's not okay. They showed up and asked for all 4 of their children to be returned to them. So the children returned to a place they hadn't lived for nearly a decade. They returned to a strange place with strangers as their parents. Their parents also had 8 other children that were strangers. The house was even more dirty and cramped with 14 people living inside, and most of the children would sleep on the floor since there were not enough mattresses for everyone. And for the first time that Robert could remember, he would experience physical and sexual abuse at the hands of his father. Robert's father had a short fuse and would get furious over the smallest infractions. If they didn't do their chores, or if they were late getting home to and from school, they would be beaten with any close weapon the man could find, like a cane, a rod, or a stick. Robert's father was someone who felt above the law and entitled. He encouraged and taught each of his children to commit crime, specifically stealing food. If the children got caught stealing, they would get a beating. Not for stealing, but for getting caught.
But for getting caught. Man, that's a little messed up right there. Just like, oh, you're late from school, whap. You're not doing your chores, whap. Got caught stealing? Did you at least, do you still have the food? Do you still have like the bread and stuff? No, whap. Just, it's a little rough.
Definitely not a loving home.
No.
The worst beatings were reserved for Robert. He would speak up, try to protect his other siblings from the beatings, and stand up to his dad, which resulted in a worse beating for him. Isolation would be a common way that his father would abuse the children, locking them up for weeks at a time. He kept Robert in a room away from the others, and 4 to 6 times a day he would go in that room just to beat Robert. Robert had no contact with anyone else except for his dad. The longest stretch of this isolation was 6 months.
Jeez.
One time, George went into the room and he was holding a .22 caliber air rifle to hit him over the back with. And he hit Robert so hard with the air rifle that it actually broke in two. This left Robert in excruciating pain, cowering as his dad left the room, laughing.
Is there like any mention of like where it broke? Because what I'm imagining right now is just that .22 caliber air rifle, like the barrel.
You're asking where it broke?
Yeah, mainly kind of where it broke, because like again, what I'm thinking whenever I'm thinking of the .22 air rifle is like, and I'm also thinking like air rifle, is that like a BB gun or just like an actual hunting rifle? I'm assuming actual hunting rifle. But like you have the barrel and then just like the stock. Did it break on the stock or did it break near the barrel?
That's a really good question. I don't know exactly where it broke. In the sources it didn't necessarily say, but I do know that like his dad went in there threatening him, like pointing it at him.
Oh, jeez.
And then ended up beating him with it and it broke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. Have you broken a rifle before?
No.
Oh. I've seen Wolverine break a rifle in two before.
Well, did he break it or did he like chop it off?
Dude, he like slammed it over his thigh in Logan. I just recently watched Logan.
Geez, it's been a minute since I've seen Logan.
Yeah.
Good movie. That one made me cry.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
George would physically abuse him and sexually abuse him. On several occasions, Robert would be raped by his father. Of course, this would leave huge psychological scars imprinted on Robert. Robert's childhood experience would be the driving force in the crimes that he would eventually commit. What about his mom, you may wonder? She was just as awful because, well, she never laid a finger on Robert. She never stopped the abuse. The awful reality was that she would watch it and sometimes encourage it. She would also snitch on her kids to their father.
Gosh.
She never stuck up for her own children, and Robert felt completely abandoned by her. A year of the most severe abuse experienced in Robert's life. His young life crawls by. At this point, it's unclear if social services took him or if his dad decided to send him back because he didn't want Robert around anymore. But Robert did go back into the care system, but only Robert. None of the other children were sent into the system. When the other siblings asked where Robert had gone, their father told them Robert was dead. And Robert was left to think that he wasn't good enough and was given away. From age 10 to 16, not much can be found on Robert. But when he turned 16, he fled the violence of his situation and Robert ran away to London. It was the promise of a new start with the bright lights and energy London had to offer. But what Robert found was a miserable place full of hardship. London would prove unkind and cold to Robert.
So just real recap, because my brain's kind of working in a weird way. So from 10 to 16, we have like no accounts of like where Robert was or what happened to him.
He was just in the system and there's no records on him.
No records on him. But that last little bit of the sentence, you said like he escaped the violence. Are we talking about like the violence of his family, like his past family, or just like was he again abused from like another family?
I think that whatever situation he was in, if it was in foster care or if he was in another orphanage, it wasn't a good situation for him. And he ended up running away when he was 16 years old.
Okay.
And he ran away at that age to London. There wasn't much information as far as,
Like
I
what
said.
what happened to him?
With no money and no job, he was forced to live on the streets. At the young age of 18, Robert would find himself addicted to hard drugs and turning to sex work and petty crimes to pay for his addiction. During this time, Robert would be raped by an acquaintance. The trauma of this, mixed with his past, would haunt him and take a huge toll on his mental health. The struggle became so unbearable that several times Robert tried to kill himself. During one of his darkest moments, about ready to end it all, one last time, Robert decided he needed help. He bravely sought help, and for the next few years, he would be in and out of psychiatric hospitals trying to get help. In his sessions during his hospital visits, Robert would open up about the violence he had experienced at the hands of his father and the total abandonment by his mother. He was hoping that someone could help him because one of the things he repeated in those visits was that there were voices in his head, and those voices were telling him to kill his parents, George and Jean. He would repeat, "I need to kill my parents. I want to kill my parents." Given the context of the abuse Robert had experienced in his childhood at the hands of people that were supposed to care for him, this response is normal, albeit unhealthy, for the victims of abuse to experience intense hatred and anger at their abusers. But an eye for an eye isn't how most societies operate legally, and Robert understood this. He understood that these thoughts were serious and harmful to him and others, and he did the most responsible thing he could at the time and sought help. Unfortunately, this was in the 1970s, and his mental health would go truly untreated. The voices in Robert's head would not go away, and things would only go downhill from here. In March of 1974, Robert is 20 years old and still making money through sex work. At this time, he met a man named John Farrell. John is 30 years old, works as a builder, and lives in a place called Wood Green, London. John and Robert take a liking to one another, and whether they were in a relationship or John was a longtime client of Robert's, the sources are conflicting. But for 6 months, John and Robert are comfortable with each other. A rapport has been built between these two. One day, John invites Robert to his apartment in Wood Green. Robert makes his way to the apartment, and he arrives high on drugs. The two get comfortable together, and we can speculate what exactly they're doing. They're in bed chatting, and at some point during the conversation, John turns to his bedside table and opens his drawer. From it, he pulls a stack of photos that he has taken. Robert, still high, begins to look through the photos as horror rushes through him. The photos that John was showing to Robert was of John himself molesting children in different poses and positions.
Oh my gosh.
Some photos were indecent photos of the children by themselves. John looks at Robert, hoping that Robert will also get off on these photos, and he goes so far to ask Robert if he can recreate some of the scenes in the photos with him. At this moment, Robert's brain, which is still high, goes foggy, and a switch goes off. He looks to the floor where a piece of rope is laying. He jumps out of bed, grabs the rope, and attacks John Farrell. No matter how hard John struggled to get away, Robert was stronger than him. He had a firm grip, and eventually John Farrell stopped breathing. John was dead. Robert was not done. All the rage inside of him and the voices telling him to kill his parents were too much. He found a knife and stabbed John's body multiple times. Then he found a hammer and used it to smash John's head until he was unrecognizable. When he finished, he was starting to sober up. He looked at the body and felt justified. He just freed the world of another pedophile who deserved to die. Not another child would be harmed by John Farrell. And even though Robert felt justified in what he had done, he also knew that what he did was wrong. Most people who commit a gruesome murder like the one he had just committed would try to cover up any evidence. not Robert. Later that day, he walks into a police station, walks up to the receptionist, says directly to them, "I've murdered somebody, and I have to tell you about it immediately." The interrogation was hours long. Robert was detailed, honest, and upfront with everything he had done to John Farrell, stating that the man deserved to die and he was protecting future children. Robert was taken into custody and eventually went to trial. At trial, they took a look at his file with his history of child abuse, drug addiction, multiple stays in psychiatric care, suicidal attempts, and hearing voices. They deemed him not fit to stand trial, and he was sent to Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital, a high-security hospital for the criminally insane. Broadmoor Hospital was the world's first asylum, opened in 1863. Broadmoor still exists to this day, treating those who have committed a crime but who aren't mentally fit to stand trial. Someone who is not to be trusted in a regular prison and who needs treatment will go to Broadmoor Hospital. They have treated infamous criminals such as Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, Graham Young, the teacup poisoner, and Charles Bronson, the UK's most violent prisoner. For the first time in years, Robert started thriving. In Broadmoor, there was stability, there was consistency, there was food and a roof over his head. He was able to make a few friends and socialize while he was in Broadmoor. For 3 years, Robert lived in peace. In 1977, Robert met the acquaintance of David Allen Francis, another criminally insane patient. At some point during David's stay, he attacked another patient and sodomized them. This patient, who David attacked, was a friend of Robert's. When it became known to Robert that David Francis was also a pedophile, he began to hatch a plan that he told to his friend, fellow patient, and inmate, David Cheeseman. So not to be confused with David Francis, I'm going to be calling him Cheeseman. I know Cheeseman's a really strange last name. I don't know. I can't get around it.
It's British. I mean, hey,
Wallace and Gromit, I feel like is the vibe there. I'm not wrong.
You're not wrong. But also just last names in general just are interesting. Like a lot, like there are some people, last name Fuller. Like Fuller used to be like a huge occupation. You used to make soap as a Fuller. That's what you were.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So maybe David Cheeseman. I'm sorry, just Cheeseman.
I know. He actually changed his name later. I can't remember what it is, but at the time he was Cheeseman.
David Yogurtman?
Another dairy product of some kind.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So maybe his ancestors made cheese, so they would be like,
oh yeah,
just go to the Cheeseman.
Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Cheeseman and Robert hatch a plan, and they're going to murder this pedophile and get revenge for their friend.
And this pedophile is David
Francis.
Okay, David Francis.
Cheeseman does not hesitate. He agrees with the plan. This is how the brutal events unfolded. They had no access to weapons in the hospital. They needed to find or make one. During a meal at Broadmoor, since they only have plastic spoons and forks to eat with, Robert keeps one of the plastic spoons. He then files down the handle until it's a sharp blade. They were ready. I'm actually surprised that he was able to take one of those plastic. I don't know. You think that they would be more vigilant, but I guess
it's an insane asylum. I'm sorry, but from what I've seen with Gotham, just
such a good show.
Really, really good show.
Yeah.
Honestly, really loved it.
Yeah.
And just as far as my knowledge goes, which is again next to none as true crimes, but it's just they're in an insane asylum. I feel like they're allowed to get away with crazy crap, but it's also just I don't know, maybe dude is just obsessed with spoons and they didn't take into account for it, because most of this stuff would have gone thrown away, right? Plastic spoons, plastic forks and knives, and then just I don't know, styrofoam trays.
Well, I think because this is the 70s, I think this is the harder plastic.
Ooh.
They're Tupperware, maybe. Like, we know how durable Tupperware is.
Yeah.
Like, I'm imagining like a Tupperware, like plastic.
Yeah, that makes more sense. I'm just imagining just like crappy,
Like a flimsy.
yeah, just crappy little sporks that you get from like middle school lunch. Just file that. Those things are still sharp. I'm not gonna lie.
They
Those things
are.
are still freaking
They can
sharp.
still do damage.
But like, and I've definitely accidentally cut myself like trying to get the horrible like mystery meat at school just cut.
Yeah, then you just pick it up and bite it with your.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, those things are not doing
stab
anything.
it with a fork and just eat it that way.
They're not doing anything. Pretty sure it's just like a solid
just
plastic.
Tupperware.
Yeah,
Tupperware.
it's Tupperware. So he filed that down, made a shank, and he was ready.
Wait, where did he file it down though? That's the real question. Like, again, cartoons, you give someone a cake and there's a file inside. There's no way to like actually file that.
Who gave him a cake?
Yeah, whose birthday was it?
Yeah, how did he get that file?
Yeah, just how was he able to file that down? Like, I can imagine him breaking it off.
Maybe he chewed it down. I don't know.
That would just
Maybe it took him a long time.
Yeah, I mean, but like filing it down, you need something a little bit more harder. Like bedposts, maybe.
Maybe if they were allowed outside a little bit on the grounds, he could have found like a brick or stone.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Or just like file it on the concrete.
Yeah. Early one morning in February 1977, most of the patients played football outside, including Robert Cheeseman and David Francis.
So yeah, they were allowed outside.
Robert and Cheeseman kept their eye on Francis the entire time. Around 11 a.m., the game finished and everyone started to make their way back while Robert and his buddy Cheeseman flanked Francis as he made his way back into the building.
So it wasn't a flank during like football play. It was a flank when he was getting back into the building. Dang, all right.
This is when Robert asked one of the staff members if they could open a changing room for them. The nurse agreed, and as they unlocked and opened the door, the three men made their way inside the room. The moment the three men were inside, Robert acted quickly and slammed the door in the nurse's face, locking the door and barring them from coming in, as well as barring David from leaving. And this is when Robert and his friend Cheeseman attacked David Francis. The hospital staff listened in horror as screams came from the other side of the door, screams that would last over 9 hours while Robert and Cheeseman savagely tortured David Francis. The door to the room had a tiny window, so the hospital staff watched helplessly, trying to get inside the room, but the barricade was too powerful. Robert and Cheeseman bound David's hands and feet, punched and kicked him. They slammed his head repeatedly against the wall, all while David could be heard begging for his life. They took out the knives whittled down from plastic spoons, and they stabbed David hundreds of times all over his body.
Jeez.
All the scars that Robert had been carrying his whole life came bursting open as he savagely beat his victim. The screaming eerily stopped around 8 p.m. The door to the room unlocks, and from behind the door, out step Robert and Cheeseman, who calmly walk out of the room. Guards grab the two men and nurses rush inside the room. Inside was a horrible scene. Blood was smeared and splattered all over the walls, and David's body lay in a pile of blood in the middle of the room. Pieces of his skull lay around him on the floor as his brain lay exposed. They looked at his body, and sticking out of his ear, lodged in tight, was the plastic spoon. Because part of the victim's brain was missing, a staff member came to the quick conclusion that Robert had actually consumed part of the brain. This rumor quickly leaked to the press, and within the next publication, Robert's nicknames and his reputation were immortalized. Brain Eater,
That makes more sense.
Spoons.
Spoons.
And this blew up in the UK. The UK media took this and ran every which way. The story was huge. Prisoner eats people, murderer, brain eater. Every title they could think up at the time to put the Hollywood spin on murder. This is one of the most notorious myths surrounding the case of Robert Maudsley because when David Allen Francis's body was more closely inspected, they concluded that none of the brain was missing at all. He never ate part of his victims.
Huh.
Yet Robert's nicknames and reputation would stick with him for the rest of his life.
Yeah, and that just solidifies a lot of things. Like, first of all, 9 hours. 9 hours.
I
And
know.
they couldn't get, like, a locksmith or anyone in order to open up that room.
Right?
Just
What happened there?
What are you guys
was the
doing
protocol?
for 9 hours? Yeah, just like
Did they have just like a bunch of string being hospital staff that they're like, we don't know how to fight this? Like, are they super big guys?
Yeah, no, you need orderly men who can
security.
who can like tackle
Yeah.
these guys and like restrain them whenever they're having like a psychiatric episode. You need those people. You're just there for 9 hours. You're hearing screams for 9 hours.
9 hours. Yeah, it's awful.
Just what are you doing? But he
Scary.
never ate anyone.
No.
There's probably more to the story, but like everywhere else, it's like didn't eat anyone. But like the spoons makes sense now.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's like one of the biggest myths surrounding him. Robert and Cheeseman went to trial for the brutal murder of David Allen Francis. And at this time, Robert was actually deemed mentally capable of standing trial. At trial, Robert showed no remorse for the murder, even though he knew it was wrong to do so. He believed the murder was justified since David Francis was a pedophile and a threat to children, and so he deserved what he got. Both men were found guilty of manslaughter. They were sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. Instead of going back to Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane, would serve out his prison sentence in the Wakefield prison, also known as Monster Mansion, a maximum security prison with a large number of high-risk sex offenders, the most infamous rapists, murderers, and pedophiles that were housed in Monster Mansion.
Hold on. They sent someone who's been known to kill, who has killed 2 pedophiles in the past, to a place where it's just full of pedophiles, sex offenders.
Make it make sense, right? And what does Robert Maudsley hate most in the world? Sex offenders. Robert Maudsley has told authorities that he wants to and will kill sex offenders. So the judge sends Robert to his hunting grounds at Wakefield Prison. He's a knowing predator to sex offenders, right? Like he has told authorities this, and he is not sent back for help at Broadmoor Hospital, where he was actually doing well. I'm not saying that what he did was okay, but also was he
But he was thriving. Like
Yeah.
he was retaining at least somewhat of a normal life until that one factor came into play, where his friend just got brutally just was raped.
Yeah. It seemed like it's very much based in revenge for Robert.
Yeah. Is it bad that I can kind of see how it makes sense? Like a lot of like with the judge and jury, again, I don't know how they do it over in England. Like with the judge and jury saying like, here's this man who has confessed to being a sex offender killer. We have all these convicted people in this place. There might be like a shortage of rooms there, a shortage of cells. So send this guy who can free up a couple more spaces. It seems like a play at just like, here's someone to deal with like all of our other problems, and we can pin it on him.
Okay, so you're coming up with a conspiracy theory.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Right, because the government doesn't always bat 1,000, right? Like I personally don't fully trust the government and what they tell us. And you'll see how heartbreaking Robert's case is, because it just gets worse from here.
There is no real such thing as like top secret. It's just delayed information. Information will come out one way or another, just like the actual truth.
Another layer to this is in some states in the United States and in other countries, there's this idea that one can be mentally ill and be seen as mentally unfit whenever they go to trial and then be sent to a mental hospital. But as soon as they are capable, then they can stand trial. And so they will stand trial and they will still be prosecuted for their crimes. There are other countries where one of the episodes that I covered, one of the guys who was criminally insane, he went to a mental health hospital, and within 10 years, he was out walking around on the streets, no punishment, no nothing, no, like, and this was up in Canada, no retribution for the victim or his family. And anyways, so I think that there's just this like balancing point, because I do know that like if someone has mental health struggles, those things are going to last for a long time, and sometimes throughout their entire life. Sometimes they're doing better and medicated, but then people can relapse all the time with their mental health and depression and suicidal ideation. Anyway, so my whole point with that is like, I think Robert Maudsley was one of those people who his mental health, especially because of what he experienced at such a young age, and because it's the 70s, things aren't really addressed with mental health in the way that we do now. We don't have the same programs or approach. I think that Robert really was just teetering. The fact that like he was deemed mentally fit for this trial and then sent to prison, I think was a huge mistake. I think that he still needed to be taken care of in a hospital.
Yeah. People can relapse if they have really huge struggling mental illnesses and they don't have like the proper care, proper medication or anything.
The judge sends Robert to
Monster
his hunting
House.
grounds. Yep, Monster Mansion.
Monster Mansion.
And it's a year later in the Wakefield prison, July of 1978, and Robert is 25 years old. Maudsley had had enough of his fellow inmates. He woke up one morning and decided that he was going to kill as many sex offenders as he could. He spent a long time trying to lure other inmates to his cell. Robert wanted to kill as many as he could manage. 6, 7, 10. The first would be 46-year-old Solney Darwood, imprisoned for sexual assault and killing his wife. At the time, Solney was giving Robert French lessons. Robert invited him to his cell, where he strangled him and stabbed him before hiding his body under his bed. Maudsley then spent the rest of the morning trying to find other people to lure back, but no one would go with him. Fellow inmates said they could all see the madness in his eyes. Eventually, he snuck into the cell of 56-year-old Bill Roberts, serving a 7-year sentence for the sexual assault of a 7-year girl. Robert attacks him as he lay on his bunk. Robert had snapped the head off a spoon and stabbed it into Bill Roberts' brain through his ear. He then swung Bill's legs around and repeatedly smashed his head against the wall.
Jeez, how strong was Robert? Like if he's swinging around a 50-year-old man just by his legs.
A lot of people get like really yoked in prison because like you don't want to be the weakest one in prison. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no. First rule of movie prison: be the strongest guy up there. No one will mess with you.
Yeah, so you're building muscle. So yeah, I don't know. I'm guessing he was strong. When he had finished, he tucked the body underneath the bed and returned looking for his next victim. He was on a mission to kill as many sex offenders as he could get his hands on. All inmates avoided him at this point. And since he could not lure anyone back to his cell, at this point, he walks down to the guard's office, throws his makeshift knife on the desk, and calmly tells him, "You're going to be too short for roll call tonight."
Jeez.
After the double homicide at Monster Mansion, aka Wakefield Prison, Robert is again put on trial. Again, he shows no remorse for what he has done. He feels justified. He says during his trial that the violent rage directed at his victims was actually directed at his mom and dad. The face of his dad would appear on his victims as he exploded his years-long revenge onto them. Robert said, "When I kill, I have my parents in mind. If I had killed my parents back in 1970, none of these people would have died. If I had killed then I would be walking around as a free man without a care in the world."
Sure.
Robert was sentenced with 2 more life sentences for the murder of Solney Darwood and Bill Roberts. Inexplicably, these were to be served in the same prison and not in a psychiatric hospital. And at this trial, Robert was deemed too dangerous to be in general population, so in 1979, Robert was sentenced to solitary confinement. A few years go by, and in 1982, a news crew comes to Wakefield Prison to do a report on Robert Maudsley. They interview him on his crimes and how he had murdered 3 people while in prison and 1 outside of prison. Of course, it was sensationalized that he had eaten brains, and when this interview aired, the public was outraged. They demanded that the prison system should increase punishment on someone like Robert Maudsley. When this interview aired, the problematic British press gave Robert the title of Most Dangerous Prisoner in the UK, and he holds that title to this day. For whatever reason, there was a lot of pressure from the public on the prison to punish Robert Maudsley specifically, and I'm not sure who exactly he pissed off because it worked. The prison gave the public what they wanted. Wakefield Prison built Robert a custom bulletproof plastic cell made of perspex. Robert would be kept in eerily similar conditions as Hannibal Lecter because his very cell was what inspired the writers of Silence of the Lambs. The cell was 18 feet by 14 feet with only a concrete slab for a bed. He is kept in this cell for 23 hours a day with 1 hour outside. He is escorted by not 1, not 2, but 6 guards, all under orders to not speak, look at, or have any interaction with Robert, only to escort him through the 17 layers of doors to get outside, then back deep into the belly of Wakefield Prison. Robert is completely alone, with no interaction from any human. He tries to talk with the guards, but with no luck at all. And during his infamous interview that outraged the public, one can hear his speech starting to slur from lack of stimulation. Robert Maudsley's brain is in a state of deterioration. He lives in a constant state of depression, with haunting, intense eyes and pale, sunken skin from lack of sunlight, and a shock of dark hair. He looks like a Hollywood horror film character. The last photos the public has of Robert is from the 80s. For a few years in the 1990s, he was actually sent to a different prison, Parkhurst Prison. This prison began as a military hospital and children's asylum in 1778. Then it turned into a prison for children. And Parkhurst was controversial for its harsh regime, including the use of leg irons. So those are in like cartoons and stuff, whenever you see like people's legs shackled and then there's like a cast iron ball or something.
Oh.
That's what leg irons are.
Ball and chain.
The ball and chain. Yeah, but that's what it is.
See, when you were saying leg irons, I was thinking like Man in the Iron Mask. Just cast a child's leg in all that iron.
Ugh.
That would suck.
Yeah.
Like the ultimate cast, first of all, just like ultimate healing factor right there. Pray it's not made of lead.
It was in 1977 that Parkhurst became one of the few top security prisons called a dispersal, because the UK had a dispersal program where they dispersed their prisoners to a bunch of different prisons instead of keeping them all concentrated in one place like Monster Mansion.
Yeah.
So Robert ended up being dispersed to a couple of different prisons, and Parkhurst was one of them. And during this time, Robert met with a psychiatrist named Dr. Bob Johnson. Robert finally got the help he had long for craved. This doctor, it took 2 years for him to get permission to start treating Robert. He did not give up on this prisoner. And 2 years of counseling later, and Robert was making incredible progress. The anger and violence that made Robert such a danger was reduced by an estimated 75%. And in the late 90s, Robert went to Milton Keyes prison for a short time. Here he was allowed to talk with other prisoners and prison guards. He was still held in the status of solitary confinement, but he could have interaction with people.
Mm-hmm.
It was not as strict.
Just like for outside time, you can interact with other people, that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like also probably for meals. But
Mm-hmm.
when time came to like, okay, now like bedtime, you're just by yourself.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the portions exactly were for the day, but I do know that Robert got along well with the staff. He played chess with them. He had access to books and television. Like he was doing so much better in
Mm-hmm.
this type of um, schedule. Then, without warning, treatment was cut off. The prisons had lost its dispersal status, and Robert was sent back to the dungeon of Wakefield Prison, back into his cage, which is so heartbreaking because that's exactly what his dad used to punish him when he was a child, is isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And just going in there, like there are so many similarities of how he's being treated in the solitary confinement at Wakefield Prison as to how his dad would abuse him and treat him. And it's just so heartbreaking. In March of 2000, so 20 years of solitary confinement later, this like breaks my heart. 20 years of solitary confinement later, Robert begged for the terms of his confinement to be relaxed. If that couldn't happen, he begged for at least a cyanide capsule to take his own life. Both were denied. Having only spiders as companions, he wrote a letter to the court asking why he couldn't have a pet budgie. They're little, like, parakeet birds.
Yeah, little budgies.
Promising to love it, and he said, "I'm not going to eat it." Robert says, quote, "All I have to look forward to is further mental breakdown and possible suicide. In many ways, I think this is what the authorities hope for. That way, the problem of Robert John Maudsley can be easily and swiftly resolved." Robert is now 70 years old. He has since taken on the nickname the Wolf of Wakefield. To some, they will see Robert as a hero, to others, a villain. I see a wronged person trying to do the right thing, unfortunately in the wrong way, and paying an incredibly hefty price. A man where his own doctor says that he is rescuable, treatable, remediable, and he could earn money if his mind was engaged and his intellect, persistence, determination was engaged in gainful employment. He could compensate the families of his victims or something to rectify the situation. His doctor says, "I look at him and I think he could have been somebody. If given the right nurture, he would never have become a killer. Probably would become something amazing for humanity, potentially." If you happen to think that this is a case of a human rights violation, there is a petition you can sign created by Natalie Tipler for the Parole Board in the UK. She is advocating for Robert to be released from Wakefield Prison and placed in a mental health institution for assessment and to come to terms with his own terrible experiences. I will link it below. To this day, Robert has spent more than 16,700 consecutive days alone inside a bulletproof cell. He has set the world record for the most days spent in solitary confinement, where he will remain until he dies. And that is the horrifying true case of Robert Maudsley, the most dangerous prisoner in the UK.
There you go.
How was the ending?
Good for the petition to actually try and like get this man the actual psychiatric help that he does need.
I went and went on to see if there was anything that, if anyone was doing anything to try to initiate some kind of change.
Mm-hmm.
He is still in horrific conditions.
Yeah.
And the change.org petition, it was created in 2020, so 4 years ago, and it only has a little over 1,000 signatures right now. So
Mm-hmm.
while there is something that some people are trying to do, it also seems
Not
enough.
likely. Yeah.
You know, he's in solitary because he is a threat to the other prisoners. As much as I do not agree with the crimes of sexual abuse of a minor, of a child, I also think that those prisoners still deserve safety in the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, maybe it's because I wouldn't find Robert Maudsley dangerous, you know, like I am not his target. And so, like, I see him as human. You know,
Mm-hmm.
throughout this whole story, I've been calling him by his first name to increase the humanization of him and to decrease the dehumanization, because for so long he's been called a cannibal or a predator or whatever in the media. And there really is a person that is held in this cell. In true crime, I have heard of so many worse crimes committed by other people that have way less of a punishment. Like, give him a bird for God's sake. Like, why couldn't he even have a parakeet in there? I don't know what is happening over in the UK. And in it was 2023. It's the beginning of 2023 when he broke the record
For
for
longest solitary confinement stay.
yeah.
Is his name now in just like the Guinness World Record book?
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah. I'm sure they're on it. Do you think you got mailed a certificate? Like, congrats. Like, how would you feel? Like, well,
Congrats for being alone.
do I get a prize? I don't know. On a scale, like a nerd scale, how would you rate this true crime case?
I would give it a solid 8. The things that he went through suck. The whole years that he's been like being abused, put into solitary confinement by his own father, his mother saying like egging his father on, just being like, yeah, no, like give him the chair, whatever, give him the rifle. It just like that is horrible.
Yeah.
No person should go through that. It's a gruesome tale of like his life and things that he's done. His crime sucks. I'm not sure if the punishment does fit him, but for the safety of possibly himself and for others, solitary confinement is probably the way to go. But that's frankly just my opinion.
Yeah. I definitely think that adjustments to a solitary confinement could be very easily made so it's not as inhumane. And so Wakefield Prison, man.
That's really the main thing. It's just
Monster
like the morals and ethics of just everything. Just like how do we treat someone who's committed more atrocious sins against humanity versus someone who's killed 2 pedophiles.
Yeah. Ugh.
It's the morality and ethics of everything, and it's a whole bunch of blurred lines. You don't know what to do.
Yeah. I definitely know that the law and the justice system always needs reformation. Thank you so much for being on my podcast today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It was so fun. And you're a noob, and I loved every minute having you on here. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of I Didn't Like the Ending. We will see you in 2 weeks with a new episode, and hope you have an amazing and safe rest of your day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.